Thank you very much for this opportunity. Uh, I'm also grateful, of course, for the opportunity which was given to us to witness the recent parliamentary and regional elections in May this year. It was like witnessing history as it is being made, and to participate, even if it was just as an observer in the process of the creation of a new model of democracy, which Sira was talking about, was indeed an inspiring and a learning experience. So one salutes actually the brave people of Venezuela who for years and years have been living under sanctions and being demonized by powerful lobbies in the world, and must be really difficult. In fact, there's so much calumny and so much hateful false propaganda that is churned out against countries that refuse to surrender to the diktats of the empire, that it's always important for people who stand in solidarity, for example, in this case with Venezuela, to keep abreast of developments and renew our perspective and keep learning. Uh, I teach Latin American history and culture in Jamia, a public university here in New Delhi. And one of the topics that we deal with in the class is the conquest of America, which we read as the beginning of colonialism and racial capitalism. And we talk about this fierce debate which took place in Valladolid in 1550, in the heart of the empire, the Spanish Empire, between the Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas and the humanist scholar Juan Gines de Sepulveda. Las Casas had returned from nearly 50 years of in the Americas. He had been the Bishop of Chiapas, and he had witnessed the appalling cruelties of the colonizers on the native people, on the indigenous people. The central question which was being raised in this Valladolid debate was whether or not the indigenous peoples of the Americas were fully human, and as humans entitled to rights and protection like the European colonizers. As I teach this cultural history course, students are often surprised that the terms of that debate are quite the same as we hear today when the empire intervenes in sovereign nations, arrogating itself this moral force. The colonial rhetoric really hasn't changed much. So coming back to the Valladolid debate, Gines de Sepulveda, drawing on Aristotle, was arguing that the indigenous people of America were natural slaves. They were incapable of self-government, and it was Spain's moral duty to wage war on them. So Sepulveda used this concept of just war to justify Spanish conquest, arguing that given their practices of cannibalism, human sacrifice, these barbarians needed to be subjugated and civilized. Las Casas, of course, challenged this interpretation, arguing that the Spanish were not engaged in a just war, but what they were carrying out was, in fact, a campaign of aggression and exploitation. And in fact, Las Casas went so far as to defend even human sacrifice, because he said that the greatest and the most valuable good, which is human life, that is what they are offering with, and it was a mark of religious feeling and not barbarism or irrationality. About 500 odd years later, we hear a similar rhetoric from imperial quarters. For example, in the 2003 Iraq War, the Bush administration was arguing vigorously that it was a just war based on the prevention of the grave threat that the WMDs posed. So the so-called civilized world, free world, we have heard Bibi Netanyahu use these terms in the very recent speeches during the Zionist aggression against Iran. And, and they have kind of become euphemisms for the empire. So what it does in the name of civilization, first and foremost, like earlier times, the empire vilifies, demonizes, and bestializes anyone who stands for an alternative worldview. What the Bolivarian process represents is certainly a civilizational alternative, and therefore it becomes a threat, and its othering becomes imperative. So the war against Venezuela, which is being fought, as we all know, is not just through sanctions and coercive economic measures, but it's in the realm of culture. It's in the realm of images to justify this range of actions, which the final, I think, ultimate aim being a regime change and fostering democracy. In India, the information and the images that reach us through mainstream media are predominantly a redeployment of the same narrative as big news agencies hand over to our media houses. So one is grateful to alternative media sources, including those represented here, for helping us understand what is happening in Venezuela. And therefore, being a witness to the election process on May 25 was a very important opportunity for us. So I speak not as a neutral observer or an expert, but as someone profoundly partisan to the process, someone who is interested in it and looks at it with a lot of hope. We were actually three of us from India. And while we are aware that any serious estimation of the Bolivarian process as it stands today cannot be a black and white picture, we found ourselves in the midst of a reality that clearly belied the image the mainstream media presents on the ongoing Bolivarian process and its leaders, which is usually a caricature. So Nicolas Maduro as dictator, hated by the people, and the people of Venezuela kind of with no freedom to express any contrarian views, elections being won by fraud, and so on and so forth. So we had the opportunity to witness the PSUV's last election rally in Petare, in this neighborhood, and it was a unique opportunity. Of course, Petare is this huge neighborhood. It's in the province of Miranda, and in the eastern hills of Caracas. And Elio Serrano, who was the incumbent PSUV governor, he was seeking re-election. Contrary to the image of the people, kind of living in oppressive dictatorial regime who can't open their mouth, etc., what we saw was a vibrant people and popular enthusiasm in the election rally. It reminded us of our own rallies, songs, music, of course, but the vibrancy was even more. So, slogans and placards. The rally was also a demonstration, I think, of the organizational strength of the PSUV. It has been mentioned by one of the speakers how the Chavistas actually went mobilizing people door to door this time. And the campaign actually, one could see in this rally, that was the last rally, and one could see that this campaign for strengthening the participatory democratic process through elections finds quite a lot of popular support, which in what we know is a highly polarized society otherwise. In fact, we asked one of the Chavista organizers that they must have put in a lot of hard work to mobilize so many people for such a huge rally. And she smiled and she said, no, 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 it comes naturally to us. In other words, what we were seeing is mobilized Chavismo. So this mobilized Chavismo is, of course, a result of the actual vibrancy and the political zeal of the Bolivarian process. Um, because it's very clear that for more than 2 decades, Washington has been intervening in the Venezuelan society to kind of sap the support for the revolution, like it has been doing in Cuba, kind of guillotine the revolution, people will get fed up. But the Bolivarian Revolution, amidst all the difficulties and the roadblocks, including some of their own making, has certainly been able to continue to maintain its popular base, was the impression we got. The 42.66 turnout, which was announced, which of course now has been updated to 43.18, may seem a tad low for us in India, but in the context of the call for boycott, of predictions by the opposition that barely a 15% were going to vote, it certainly represents a great victory for the democratic process itself. But why the boycott? Of course, we know the reasons, but we asked the Chavistas and, the people who were helping us out. And a young Chavista just quipped and said, it's profitable to be in opposition. Indeed, the figures, if you see of Venezuelan far right who go to the US and, they get this royal treatment. And as
1 minute, Sonia.
yeah, I'm finishing. As an Indian who may be very critical of our own democracy, it is incomprehensible how public figures, from the Venezuelan political space can ask for expansion of sanctions against their own. So this mobilized Chavismo that we notice, which Sira was referring to, especially since 2023, um, uh, the kind of democracy which with the kind of Venezuelan society which the constitution describes as democratic, participatory, and protagonistic. So this concept of protagonistic democracy, which is an aspiration to strengthen the role of the citizens in the direction of the state, as opposed to the leading role of typically played by elected representatives, as we see in our own democracy in India. This clearly has forged a new kind of citizen, and it is an alternative form of democracy, a new way of life, which where democracy itself becomes a site of revolution. And for those of us who are interested in radicalizing democracies, I think the election of May 25 was indeed an eye opener. Thank you.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.